and Sarah, your host today for the Catholic Leadership Network podcast. Here we're helping ministry leaders succeed from the beginning, and we're here to talk about all the stuff that no one told you about in ministry leadership. Totally need some more coffee this morning. So today, what nobody told me at the very beginning of ministry is revolves around sarcasm.
What?
And we are recording this a couple of days after the Oscars with an infamous slap heard around the world. I don't think that I really have any comment on that per se, though my prayers really do go out to Will Smith because I'm concerned for the man.
Yes.
I'm very concerned for him. That just seems very out of the ordinary for him. So I hope he's well, and I pray for his health and well-being, along with Jada. What she's going through has a lot of mental, it's probably more mental difficulties than it is physical difficulties, you know, and that mental anguish can be very much physical pain. So I pray for both of them right now. But I do want to talk a little bit about sarcasm because, you know, what was said by the comedian on stage, Chris Rock, in my personal opinion, was not the worst thing that I had heard either that night or in any award shows. But the difference was where Jada and Will are in their journey. And that's, I think, what we need to pay attention to in ministry when we are joking. When we are joking around, having fun, making a sarcastic comment, making light of a situation, we really need to be careful because we don't know where the other person is in their mind and in their journey. And so that's kind of what I want to just pop up today in our conversation. And you know, I did have an experience early on in ministry where I was sarcastic to a young person. I was in youth ministry at the time, and she was new, and we were laughing. But I think I definitely stepped over the line for her in my sarcastic tone, and she never came back. You know, so like we kind of have to be aware of that. So this is what's been on my mind and heart this week, and lots of prayers because there's a lot going on in that whole situation. And I just kind of wanted to bring up the topic of sarcasm here for us to just have a back and forth on.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, Sarah, that you said that you had a misunderstanding with the young person, because I also did. I tend to be sarcastic, especially around kids, which so here we go, you guys. It's early on. I think, what is this, like 3 minutes in, Sarah? I'm going to whip out the Brene Brown.
Take a drink, coffee.
But
Brene Brown.
One of the things is right now, you guys, if you in ministry, I really, really strongly recommend her new book. It's called Atlas of the Heart, and she's going through here and talking about describing emotions, and from, you know, compiled research, thousands and thousands of bits of data that they have brought together, and other researchers whose data that she's utilized in order to come up with definitions and things like that. But one of the things that came up around sarcasm that she had for us is that actually the human brain can't process sarcasm. Young kids, like middle school and high school, actually maybe about high school, they start to kind of get a grip about it, but middle schoolers don't really actually understand sarcasm. They can't tell the difference between when you're joking and when you're saying something in kind of like a sly, sideways sort of a way. But the other thing is, as much as I love Dr. Brown, one of the things that, I don't know, irks me a little bit, maybe is the way to say that.
What?
I know. One thing that I disagree with her. And whenever I look at her definitions and stuff, that makes sense. But she always talks about that sarcasm as a negative, and that she hates it because she very strongly feels that it's a passive aggressive attempt to say something you want to say without saying it. And I don't think that that's how I use sarcasm at all. I use it more as irony, I think, than to be hurtful.
Ooh, Irony. What's the difference between irony and sarcasm? I never really put those two words together.
Well, irony, I would say I'm not looking at the guys. I have the book beside me on my left-hand side, open to the page that says Irony and Sarcasm, but I'm not looking there right now. I'm going to just tell you that to me, irony is something incongruous in language, where just like whenever Sarah said at the top, she's had problems with sarcasm. And I said, what? Like, certainly we have all had problems with sarcasm. I think that the worst place that we have it in today's age is text message, right? You say something in text message. And actually, I had one friend that used to say all the time, there needs to be sarcasm font so that people know that when you're texting in sarcasm, that they can somehow know that. And I don't know what the clue is for that. I'll tell you too, like growing up, we had a person, my sisters and I will relate to this story in a heartbeat. We had a person in our lives that used to tell like totally tall tales, was the hero in every instance, did everything perfectly, whatever. And we would make an okay sign under the table to each other. Okay. Yeah, we totally believe you. That is where I think that to me is a version of sarcasm. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's a version of sarcasm. I think, I don't know. I've just always thought that sarcasm has an underlying element of truth to it. And I think that that's where people mentally go when they hear sarcasm. Like they'll joke and they'll laugh because they know it's sarcasm, but then when they go, their mind rehashes and rehashes and rehashes to where is the element of truth in that? There is an element of truth in that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that that's where the difficulty is with those kinds of jokes. I also think that, especially with our young people, bullies rely on sarcasm. And they say things in a sarcastic tone, in a sarcastic manner, and they think that they can get away with it because, oh, I was just joking. I was just teasing.
Yeah.
No. And it doesn't matter how old you are, a bully is a bully. Yeah. And bullying hurts, like physically hurts, and people die because of bullies. And so we got to be real careful about that we are not in a joking manner, quote unquote, becoming a bully and not even realizing it. Bullies don't think that they're bullies because they think that they're funny. They think that they're joking.
So, okay. All right. So then I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah. And actually one just came up this past weekend, and it was a friend, a decently close friend of mine who I know pretty well. She was in another, highly intellectual isn't the right word, but highly educated field before she came into ministry. So she had degrees and accomplishments in another field before she was called into ministry. We were talking about something, I forget what it was. And she said, she's a really sweet gal, but she said, yeah, I'm smart too. And I said, yeah, okay, like that. And then I immediately grabbed her arm and said, I'm kidding, like that. Because, and I think she knows though too, like she can be like a little airheaded sometimes. And there was a moment of like something similar to that, like right before when that's where the tease was coming from. But I don't think, gosh, what are we going to go to confession after this one, Sarah? What? But I don't think that I personally use sarcasm as a way to say mean things to people without having to take responsibility for that. I think that whenever I'm using sarcasm, it's usually it's most often in a self-deprecating way, or sometimes I use it as like hyperbole to say like, I'm going to kill somebody, and I wouldn't like I would never. I don't think I have it in me, actually.
Oh man. Yeah. I think we have to be careful with the self-deprecation too with our young people, because as ministry leaders and even our young adults, you know, as ministry leaders, we are teaching our young people how to relate to themselves and the world around them. If we are joking about our weight, our hair, our looks, that underlying truth of how we feel about ourselves is something that they will learn as a tactic to move through their pain, as opposed to meeting it head on and learning tools to work through it and take action towards whatever it may be. So I think that even turning the sarcasm on ourselves, we just have to be careful, you know, and I think that sometimes it's funny and I think sometimes it's okay. I don't want to make any blanket statements here. We really have to pay attention to our audience and know who our audience is and where they are coming from. And I don't use that term because of this weekend's Oscars. I use that term because we are regularly on show in front of people. People are looking to us to model the faith and what's okay and what's not. And I'm not saying our faith can't be fun and funny, because God has a sense of humor. Jesus sure did. You know, so I think that we can be lighthearted in those ways. I think we just have to be aware of our tone and when it goes over the line.
I agree. But I guess here's where I'm thinking of, like, for me, where sarcasm comes in ministry particularly is like, obviously there are things about the church and there are behaviors that happen at being in congregations. And actually, to be honest, I don't think that it matters if you're Catholic or if you're Protestant or if you're whatever. I'm not sure in other traditions, like, do people have the unmarked pew or seat that belongs to them? You know, and
yeah,
like,
I'm pretty sure that's across religions.
Yeah. I the other is, like, I made a joke to I have a new business manager at my work. And the other day I pulled into a parking space and I literally backed out of it and parked somewhere else because I was like, the girl is having a tough time, like, adjusting. We have a lot of buildings, a lot of cemeteries, a lot of things to take care of, in addition to all of the regular, like, paying the bills and that sort of stuff. So I know that she's stressed out a lot and she's working her butt off and doing her best and everything. But I was just like, you know, I'm just going to do this one thing to not irritate her, where I'm going to not park in her spot, because she's literally been parking in the same one spot all of the time. And so I just pulled out, and then I told her whenever I came in, I said, hey, I just want you to know I didn't park in your spot, which to me is sarcasm, right? But then she was like, what? And I was like, I just was trying to be helpful and not make your day any more stressful. So I didn't park it in your spot. And she was like, I don't have a spot, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I get agitated about my parking spot, my seat, my whatever. And so for example, like, you know, you're giving a talk and you say to people, you got to be careful where you sit when you come to daily mass, because you don't want to be sitting in someone's spot. And someone says, people have, like, unmarked pews. When did that start? Pretty sure probably at, like, the Last Supper, but whatever. But see what I mean? Like, there's sarcasm that's not directed at, like, I'm not trying to harm anybody with that kind of irony or that sort of thing. And I think that there's plenty of places where that comes in. And I guess that's what I find disconcerting, I guess, about my hero, Brene Brown, not thinking that there's places where irony can be, and that sort of irony, sarcasm, being funny. So do we want to look at like this specific definition that she's
Yeah,
laid out
can
in the
you read
book?
that off from the book? I thought that was really interesting when you brought it up.
Sure. So just to be clear, guys, this is Dr. Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. She has definitions in here, and for irony and sarcasm together, she has irony and sarcasm are forms of communication in which the literal meaning of the words is different, often opposite from the intended message. In both irony and sarcasm, there may be an element of criticism and humor. However, sarcasm is a particular type of irony in which the underlying message is normally meant to ridicule, tease, or criticize. Ouch.
Yeah. And I think her definition, well, I hear what you're saying with regards to sarcasm not always being to ridicule, tease, or criticize. Like, I think you're right on that. But again, I think that there's an intrinsic nugget of sarcasm that is true. Irony is opposites.
Incongruity.
Right. Whereas sarcasm has that nugget of truth in there. And I think that that's what makes sarcasm so difficult, because we don't know where the person receiving that comment is in their mind. Right?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, we can't know what is always going on with the other person. And even as well as you think you know somebody, unless like, and I'm going to use my sisters as an example, Sarah, I don't know, you also have a sister. I don't know how like much, my two sisters are only 2 and 4 years younger than me. And the 3 of us literally grew up together. So we know all the same movies, all the same stuff. I can pretty much like, when I read their texts, I hear it in their tone of voice, that whole thing, and so with us, I think that there's a little bit of a difference there about knowing each other and what's jokeable and what's not. But here's what Brene says at the end of this section, which I think is super important for us to think about when we think we're being funny or whatever. It says, the biggest watch out with irony and sarcasm. Are you dressing something up in humor that actually requires clarity and honesty? And that's what I think is the problem is when you say something that you're upset about or that's bothering you or that's irritating, and you try to make it like, oh, it's just a joke, but really you are mad that somebody parked in your parking space, your unmarked parking space, or they I don't know, what do people do that people get sarcastic about? Deadlines, probably. Deadlines, I think, is a big one. We're like, no, it's fine. Everything's completely fine. Like, I'm not drowning in work right now. I definitely need your 3 things to do as well. Thanks. I don't know, father, business manager, pastoral associate, whomever is like parishioner, whoever's on your case about whatever.
Well, and that was irony over sarcasm because you really meant the opposite.
Oh, true. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think irony is more safe than sarcasm is. Sarcasm, I think, really it can be biting. And some people can't handle it. Now, you're right. We can't know what's going on in other people's minds, right? And I think I don't want people to feel that they can't say anything either, or I have to pay attention to every word that comes out of my mouth. But I just want to raise awareness of this, and apologies are good. Our music director, I said something that was probably a little too close to the line, maybe even over the line. And, I went back to him a day or so later after I processed it, like I was thinking of my sarcasm and my joking with him. And I felt bad, and I came back and I said, I'm sorry if that was over the line. I realized afterwards that, we don't know each other that well yet. And that might've been over the line, So I think that And the thing with sarcasm with one other person is also the other people who are in the space.
True. Yes.
Right. So I had a situation at one of my parishes where two of the higher folks on the staff were joking about and rolling their eyes at, I would say, making fun of another person on the staff, and when they weren't around, right? So they weren't even doing it to their face. They weren't around. And I had to pull them aside and say, I don't think that this is appropriate. I'm really uncomfortable with it. I don't think it's appropriate. I think you're teaching other staff members that it's okay to make fun of somebody on our staff. And that's really a cancer to our staff, because when that person leaves, who do we turn on then? Right? You're going to turn on somebody else. Maybe you'll turn on me. Maybe you'll turn on that person. You know, like, who is it? But, you know, some of the other folks on the staff are also making jokes, but looking at you for affirmation. And we can't do that. Like, it was very uncomfortable. It was all okay after I made that comment, and everybody's all hunky dory now. And literally it never happened after that. You know, but those third parties, it can create anxiety in them. Like, we have an anxious society now. Right. Yeah. And those who are of the younger generations, millennial and Z, have higher anxiety than those in the upper generations. Yeah. And Xers kind of and boomers kind of tossing around sarcasm because that's the way we grew up. You know,
I feel like Xers are like legitimately the crown champion of sarcasm.
Well, yeah, because nobody cared about us. We were like the middle child that nobody cared about. You know,
hey, watch the middle child references. I'm not one, but I love one. There's sarcasm right there. I mean,
now that's funny, but that was not directed towards your sister. That was not degrading your sister. No. You know, like, I think, yeah, I don't know what I was saying. I don't know.
Well, I think that here's the other thing too. When you said, is sarcasm always meant to ridicule, tease, or criticize? I do think that whenever I'm using sarcasm, I am criticizing something. Something. I might not be criticizing someone. I might be criticizing some general social practice that I find incongruous with what it means to be a disciple of Christ, i.e. the reserved seat situation. Like, who in the world believes that Jesus is Lord and follows him and thinks that we should love God and our neighbor as ourselves and doesn't move their butt over when somebody else needs a seat? I mean, even like, remember gallantry back in the day when you would get up out of your seat when a pregnant woman got on a bus, or, you know what I mean? Open the door for people coming in near you, or hold the door for somebody with a lot of packages in their arms. You know, manners and poise and gallantry. I just think that those things are missing from the world. And I criticize our social environment and our society when I feel like things that are just general kindnesses to one another are avoided or frowned upon or even ridiculed, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think this is a fascinating conversation, and I don't really have any answers or things that I want to tell people to do or not to do from this. You know, the whole purpose of our podcast is really, what do you wish you knew when you started in ministry? And this is one of those things, and society just put a spotlight on it. And I think we want to be aware of that, pay attention to that, see how other people in our circles utilize sarcasm, and when does it feel okay? When is it uncomfortable and not okay? And when it's uncomfortable and not okay, making a comment about that, and being maybe not just a comment, but raising awareness of that may be inappropriate. You know, that might have been too far. You know, like, hey, Chris, you know, commenting about somebody's hair might not be the way to go, right? Like, you don't know people's health situations, right? Like, hey, Chris, you know, like, I wouldn't handle it in the way that was publicly demonstrated this past week. But I do think conversations on it, especially with parish staff, I think is helpful, because I do think that sarcasm can be used as a bullying tactic in adults on staff. And I think that that can be disempowering to staff members.
Yeah. And I think that is a great point, Sarah, because the other part is we've got to watch and have awareness around how we're using sarcasm, especially because in many cases it is toward or against people who are at odds or are, like, seem to be in the minority or on the outside. And if we are trying to be inclusive and inviting and we want to hear every voice, sarcasm in this negative way that we're talking about is the quickest way to shut somebody else down and say your voice doesn't matter here and we don't want to hear it. And so it does, I think it requires a ton of bravery to kind of step up to that as well, which can feel scary. But I think talking about it with a mentor or a close friend in ministry before you kind of make that approach to say, like, this is, because it is going to be a hard conversation, because the other thing is what you probably will get as a result is that person being sarcastic toward you and saying like, oh, you know, Christy can't take a joke and she just can't adjust and whatever. But I do agree though too, because I've seen like where jokes are made about people with disabilities, people of other ethnic backgrounds, all kinds of other things that, exactly like you're saying, like whenever it's a health problem or what have you, like that's a problem. And that's not room for jokes, or because that's just mean and nasty, hurtful and exclusive and excluding. And I'm not for that.
No. So I'm not for that either. And even people who are just a little bit more flamboyant, louder, a little bit more opinionated, a little bit more vocal, people who are just a little bit more than the others in the room. Like, I don't like using others either, because that also vilifies.
Makes an us and them, yeah.
It does make us and them. And I don't want that either. You know, there's a culture in the space in which we work, and people who are different than the culture, more than whatever that culture is in that space, they are creating the diversity in the space, right? And so you're right, we want to make sure that we're not creating them as an other, but we're inviting them into the inclusion and diversity, equity, diversity, inclusion. I mean, they're all really powerful statements nowadays.
Yeah, I think too, the other is I don't want to encourage anybody to be divisive in their with their staffs either. And so I think watching how you have the conversation about something that you're uncomfortable with, you know, I think that I statements are important, because you also don't want to project, like if I'm in a meeting and I feel like somebody said something bad about Sarah, that I say, you know, you excluded Sarah and you said these mean things to Sarah. I'm going to say, I felt uncomfortable because I felt that Sarah was put down. I felt that it was being, exclusionary to Sarah. I just didn't feel comfortable. And maybe you can ask a question to come at it with curiosity of, do you feel threatened by that? Or is that uncomfortable for you? I mean, we could at another point get into, Anne Garrido has some work. She's a Catholic, she's a teacher, professor, and writer, and she talks about a book called Redeeming Conflict. And in there, she talks about like how you work through some of those difficult conversations, because I do think that especially with staffs, you get closer and you're working tightly with each other, and you can easily have missteps That's part of the relationship though. But
Mhm.
something I just heard yesterday on a podcast, and I don't remember who exactly said it, but it was, you become closer with others when you go through adversity with them. And I think that when you have difficult conversations and you speak to that, you guys can just as a team grow closer together. But I think great point, Sarah, of
Yeah,
having that awareness, because we're not going to say things perfectly all of the time. We can't be perfect.
true.
But we can try to work on that. So it's not that you don't belong in ministry till you have all these things straight. It's
Right.
you work in ministry and you work on getting these things straight.
Right. Thanks for bringing up the I statements, the I feel, and the curiosity or wonderment,
Yeah.
going into difficult situations and scenarios with those tools in your tool belt, I think will help with the conversation, keep emotions at bay, and help move forward a positive outcome. So I feel, I wonder, I'm curious, all of those are really good things. I would stay away from, I would encourage people to stay away from why questions, because why questions can come across as judgmental. Like, why did you say it like that? Why did you say it like that? Comes across very judgmental. Tell me a little bit about how you came to that statement. Right? Not as judgmental, or hopefully it wasn't judgmental at all. But if we could come into those conversations in that manner. Christy, oh my gosh, I just looked at the time. We are at time. How do we do this? I do want to keep it to our half hour. So thank you everybody for joining us on this conversation today for the Catholic Leaders Network, talking about sarcasm, joking, dissonance, incongruency in our conversations. I mean, this was really a good conversation. So thanks for joining us. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, right? We don't have all the answers here. And this one, you could come down on either side on this one. So I'd love to really hear what you have to say. So please comment in the comments below, YouTube, Facebook, all of our podcast channels. Just feel free to drop your thoughts in there. Until next time, thank you for joining Christy and I on this week's Catholic Leadership Network, where we talk about all those things that nobody told us starting out in ministry. Thanks a bunch and have a great day, y'all.
Peace.
All of a sudden, I'm from the South.
Y'all.